everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Teresa Weipert. Teresa Weipert is currently a general manager of Maximus U.S. Federal Services segment. Before Maximus, she served as the vice president and service delivery leader at IBM, leading its healthcare, life sciences, and SLED Public Markets. Her previous leadership experience includes executive roles at top companies such as Accenture, Sutherland Global Services, and Unisys. During her 20-plus year career, she has focused on business process outsourcing and IT services management. So without further ado, Teresa, welcome. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing with us your story and experience today.
Thank you.
Could you start by telling us how you became interested in technology?
Sure. So I started in college, of course, with some IT courses. But then when I started work or started my career, I started as what was referred to at the time as a district accountant. And then what happened is really a great opportunity. So I learned the process of what was going on. I got accepted as basically a SME. Into the IT department, and then from there started taking all sorts of courses. Eventually, that the company sponsored me in and became a systems analyst, and that was really at Unisys Corporation. And at the time, just again the incredible training, but it was sort of the opportunity, and then got involved in a lot of detailed stuff, databases. Running data centers at a very early age. I had a mentor that was pulling me into everything. And so did a lot of financial systems and application support and development, new programs and things like that that were required by the business. Then what happened is, again, in that same career path, I decided I needed to do some other things, which I'm sure a lot of folks think about, but mostly in the program management area. So moved into program management, eventually moved into sales, general management, and that's sort of what's led me to where I am today.
Thank you. So could you share some examples? I know your experience and expertise, especially current job, is related to governmental services, maybe related to healthcare in your previous job at IBM as well. So could you give us maybe just one or two examples of projects you have worked on?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think you have to, from the government perspective, both state and local and the federal business of what we do, it's all about citizen services of some type, right? So we're either implementing the mission of the various agencies or delivering a service to citizens. And, it could be monitoring services, it could be new mobile applications. We're experiencing a lot of it ourselves today with some of the things that they've implemented for COVID. If you step away and look at the commercial side of my experience, and if you look at life science, but it's in supply chain. So supply chain kinds of things. So again, major applications in those areas, in the supply chain area. In most of the businesses that we're discussing, there's data involved too. So lots of data coming together, lots of updates, lots of mission critical, which is, the phrase that we use, systems. And when you sort of step away and you think people just sort of take it for granted, though maybe those of us in IT don't, but how quickly you can do something, it's not the case. You have to bring in the data, you have to bring in the applications, you have to create a mobile front end. So, I've supported many of these particular programs currently. A lot of credentialing is going on. So that's data coming in from different areas. You've got HIPAA compliance, of course, associated with all that. So it's really this whole universe of stuff. It's just huge, and it's not as easy as everybody thinks. So I've worked on a lot of those programs to get them, production ready, I guess I would say.
What kind of big questions or trends have you observed? I'm sure there's new technology introductions, adoptions, and transitions. Are there trends? What are some big trends you have been observing maybe in the last 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I was thinking about that question, that you asked me, and what I would say, because there's lots of different trends, and some of it, of course, is driven by, improvements in technology. But the one that does face both the government market space or the public market as well as our commercial is something I've heard. I just recently heard the federal market refer to it as tech debt. And really what that is, it's the investment, it's the current investment many companies have made in technology platforms and the requirement to upgrade those environments. And the requirements to upgrade come from either you and me from demanding, we want just one click kind of applications, or the industry itself in terms of what I mentioned in supply chain, quality control, all those kinds of things. But the investment's already been made. And it is a true statement that our clients have to change things, but not break anything while they're doing it. And that's very difficult to do, and it's very expensive. And so that's why the investment in technology, the investment in the people that understand how to do that and keep an operation running, as well as the program management of all of those deliverables becomes, very complex, frankly, and critical. So that's really almost every industry is facing that. They throw out terms, innovation, modernization, easy to go to the cloud. Well, none of these things, as many of you know who are in the business, that is not easy to do. Mm-hmm. So tech debt is really kind of the one area I think is important.
So given that those difficulties and challenges, what are some strategies you have adopted or you have evolved to deal with those challenges of trying to innovate things while not breaking existing things, or making sure there are alignments between different parts of the organization or technologies? What are some key steps that you would take or measures you would take to overcome or even anticipate some of the challenges?
That's a great question. But besides crossing my fingers and hoping it all works, I would say it is about the communication between the business units or the divisions that you're dealing with, as well as the IT departments. You cannot do anything in a siloed approach. So I'm going to just say, the successful programs, if you actually study them closely, you'll have the technical skills there. You'll have the people that have the experience to do things, but you'll also have a real strong communication channel between everybody. And I think that will lead almost every program I've ever touched. It is always, if there's things that go wrong, it's generally because there's not a strong communication chain of command or something like that in place. The skills, I think most people, you can find the folks in the industry who have those skills, and whether you're implementing, a new SAP system or upgrading one, or you're putting a mobile front end on something and just doing kind of screen scraping stuff. These things you can do. People have the skills to do that. But if you don't communicate what the plan is or the outcome, or you haven't set the expectations correctly, you're going to fail.
Let's get to one of the participant questions, which is about user adoption of technology. What are some challenges and strategies in order to achieve higher levels of user adoption?
I agree with you. I have a way I summarize it for myself, but making the complex simple. You cannot, continue to project complexity. You have to somehow, put it in whether it's to put it in the words or the presentations that match the audience that you're speaking to, or, again, the strong communication thing on any technical project. I wasn't, we're such an impatient community now, right? We don't, honestly, I don't know about you guys, but if I have to click more than once or twice, I'm annoyed, and if something breaks while I'm doing it, I'm even further annoyed. But I'm also forgiving too. So something else has changed here, where if I'm implementing something and a user community finds a fault or an error of some type, we sort of skip and we go on. We've gotten a little bit used to that too. So maybe we'll take on new technology faster, because I think we're generally our communities are much more tech savvy, than they were even 5 years ago. So anyway, I good project management or program management is always going to be required to get anything adopted.
So simplify things is one key strategy. How do you do that? Do you have an example of a project where things started at being complex, and then somebody, or in the process of that, it becomes simplified in the way that's easier adopted by users or the client organization? I know you work with a lot of governmental agencies. Do they use particular languages or systems that you can help to simplify the language of new technology for them to use?
I don't know if you're asking me from a technical perspective. There is never one solution here at all. The most of our government clients and commercial clients, so it's not just government, have legacy models in play, legacy programs and systems in play, COBOL programs in play in some cases. And if you look at the financial community or you look at other communities, you're going to see code and programs that are 50 years old, or maybe a little less than that. But the, you know, I don't know how to get away from taking a look at from a, I don't know if you're asking me from a design perspective, but I definitely look at commercial off the shelf programs, the ERP systems, the CRM systems, all those things, you know, are part of that simplify, you know, direction. I would not develop anything from scratch anymore. You know, so all those different things are coming into play here. I'm not sure from a technical perspective. I would say this is kind of what I always say to people when I'm getting deep into a program. I skip ahead and say APIs. Just develop an API, which is an application programming interface. You can put an API in front of everything and fix stuff. So maybe that's a way to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to transition a little bit to talk about career changes or career advancement. I think some of those in our audience are very interested in those. So you have worked in several organizations and you just got your new job in April at Maximus. Congratulations on that. So in all of these transitions, first of all, what prompted you to leave one organization for another? When do you know it's the right time?
Yeah. So I was trying to think about that. First of all, I'm really excited. I am the general manager and president of Maximus Federal. It's about a $1.6 billion division. It's really tremendously exciting. You can Google them and look up what's going on there, because there's been some recent announcements that are just going to be, that are just, I'm very excited about just generally. As far as for me, from a career perspective, you know, in reflecting upon it, it's usually, you know, momentum. I want to move on, or I want to move up. I want new opportunities in some cases. I've always had a reason, you know, to look at something else. I tell people to keep your eye on the market itself, what's happening, keep your eye on the companies that are around you and the skills that are required. And I'm not going to be bashful and tell you I also do it for the financial rewards too. So I'm not, I give advice to other people and I'm like, well, if you're pretty comfortable where you are and you like it and you see a career path, stay right where you are. But if you're, you know, if you see some other opportunities and you see some financial advancement or some further skill development, you know, take a look at it. And in my case, the skill thing is also pretty important. Each time I've either enhanced what I already knew, or I got to learn, or I'm learning something else, right? So it's really about that. And I've enjoyed every move I've made. You know, some have been opportunity specific, or someone's called me, and then maybe some have been more deliberate in terms of how I wanted to advance.
Wonderful. And I wanted to linger on that point that you made. And also it came up during our prior conversation about not being shy about talking about money or financial advancements. So what are some ways of doing that? Because some, especially for example, some women would be, and some men as well, would be afraid or that to be looked down upon or to be looked upon as greedy if they ask for raises or other financial related benefits. What are some ways you would suggest that they can do this in a way that is more acceptable and not incurring backlash?
You know, one of the things that I do, and I'm sure others do as well, but there's so much data out there today. There's so much information about salaries, base salaries, compensation packages, things like that. I like the packages. So I do that homework. And so everybody should know exactly what the going market rate is for whatever it is that they're doing. It changes a little bit depending on your location in the country, but overall you should absolutely know it. There's no reason you shouldn't. It's out there. So you should have that and make sure that you understand how you're compensated within that community. On a going forward perspective, I like the positions where I'm rewarded. You know, in addition to my base salary, I'm rewarded for good work. And that could be obviously in the sales world, it's a commission-based program. In other areas, it's project-based, it's team-based. But I like it when I'm rewarded in above what I just been paid for what I've accomplished. So look for programs like that, because that is great, because a company can control that, and they love that outcome-based in a way salary.
Thank you. And let's talk about those transitions. Whenever you transition to a new organization, so you transition from IBM to Maximus, Unisys to IBM, Accenture to Unisys, or I probably didn't get the order right. Whenever you transition, I think you're in a similar technology space, but there's got to be some organization-specific features that you need to adapt to and learn about. What are some strategies you use to adapt and transition and learn about your new organization really quickly?
Yeah, since I'm right in the middle of it myself right now, in transitioning into a fairly large, from a large organization, but into a large organization, I tend to spend I listen a lot, and I try to get to know people, and I listen. I try to understand the culture of the environment as quickly as possible. We've all gotten away from the old-fashioned sort of command and control world. So it's more of a collaborative environments. Most environments that I've gone into are very collaborative, which maybe is my choice too. I make sure I've done my homework on that to make sure I understand that that's the way it's going to be. One piece of advice I was thinking is, I don't know, you guys have experienced it, but when someone comes into an organization, they say, well, this is the way I did it at, XYZ company or whatever. I don't do that. Nobody likes to hear that. Instead, you listen, and then you can advise based on your experience. But it's not about telling them what I used to do, but more applying what you used to do to the environment. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, makes perfect sense. So just to pursue this a little bit more, you talk about understanding the new culture of the organization's culture. What kind of things do you look for to understand? What are some key things that you look for that really help you understand what an organization's culture is like?
Well, you can we've got so many tools today, LinkedIn, Glassdoor. You can find out, there's almost nothing you can't find out about what environments are like today. Also, the peer group that you're going into, you should have their backgrounds as well. What the company's mission is all about. I'm really big, and which is why I love the Maximus position I'm taking now. It's all about citizen services. So, the journey of the citizen, which is all related to agencies and in terms of what their mission is. I know, it's not really about politics as much as it is about what is it that we're trying to implement. It's whether it's the law or the rules of that environment. So, I don't know if I kind of got off track there, but hopefully that gives you, I make sure I understand exactly what I'm walking into and what the expectations of me are.
So you talked about using external website, for example, LinkedIn and things, to understand what expectations and missions about what their values.
Right. You really can tell a lot about a company too on their websites, the cultural, the statements that they make. I believe, sometimes people just think that's just sales messaging or just whatever, but it's not. People have done a lot of work to make sure that what they're putting out, maybe not everybody, but the large corporations for sure, and even the mid-size and smaller, the nonprofit kind of world. It's very clear that their websites have mission statements that have been carefully developed and positioned and put out there, and I believe them. So, if that helps, I think you can do your research and your homework that way.
I see. So let's talk about leadership. First of all, a lot of people are interested in getting into higher levels of leadership positions so they have more impact and more fulfilling, more freedom, autonomy probably at higher positions. What are some strategies of doing that? We do have an audience question actually about advancements, especially for women. In technology, what are some strategies or tips or advice you have in terms of how to rise through the ranks in organizations?
So the thing about that is, obviously there's lots of leadership styles and things and training that you can take that, and people should do that to learn that. I also think your skills are critical. So it's very important that you understand what it is that you're supposed to do, and you must have the skills and educate yourself to be able to deliver what is expected, right? And if you're also expected to learn more, right? So to learn more on the job, then you should be taking advantage of all those things. So skill is important. Personality. I tend to have a personality. I'm not combative, I suppose. We are in a collaborative world today. I think everybody has a position to take, and everyone should be heard. So I have a sort of style about that. At the end of the day, you still have to get the job done. So you have to be able to step in and face it. I don't avoid confrontation at all. I've learned that over the years. Talk up front, communicate up front, and communicate clearly and effectively. I think the traits are, respect, for others, empathy, all those kinds of things are critical and important in order to create a leadership style that helps you advance.
Mm. And in our prior conversation, you also talked about projecting confidence. Could you talk more about that?
Well, there are some days where I don't know how to do everything. Okay, so you do have to project a confidence in yourself and confidence in the position that you have or whatever it is that you're delivering. You've got to project that. You have to be, stand tall and hold a position too, in many cases. Be ready to defend. A lot of times in the business that I've been in too, you got a lot of people sitting around the table saying, in one case, questioning numbers or questioning a project outcome. Well, I better know why I'm taking that position and be able to defend it. And that's kind of what I mean by the confidence, that you have to project to move forward.
Mm-hmm. How do you develop that confidence in addition to being prepared and knowing your data and knowing how to approach your stakeholders? What else is needed to develop that sort of confidence?
Wow, that's a hard one too. I mean, again, experience over time. You're not going to be the person in charge, a couple months into a position or even a couple of years into a position. That's when I, went back at the beginning. I said, study your career path, understand what it is, what direction you want to go, and whether you want to be maybe you don't even want to be in a leadership position or a management position. You want to be a system engineer and at the top, of the engineering. You've got to decide all of those things, and that'll impact, I think, what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. You also mentioned in our prior conversation about never do anything cool without letting your boss know about it. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so you'd ask me about advice or whatever, and I'm just I learned a long time ago that, like, if you want to sit around and do something quietly by yourself and not let anybody know you did it, well then, why? So you're being paid to do a job. You're doing whatever it is that you're doing. Communicate that you're doing it, right? Don't be a martyr in the position. It's those kinds of things. It's really what I meant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's transition a little bit to talk about your experience as a woman in technology. And I'm assuming quite some situations, especially at top levels of organizations, you are probably surrounded by men. And when that happens, when you become one or two women at the table, how do you have kind of self-talk, or when you notice that, how do you deal with situations like this where you feel very visible?
And it is true that in the technology field, it is still a lot of men, in the field. And so if your question is, how am I positioning for that, or how do I get through some of those things in a dominated environment like that? Again, obviously experience, making sure I again, project confidence in what I know and my knowledge. I project anyway that I know kind of what I'm doing. I worry about that for women in particular still, though, because it's talked about a lot, that women are exiting the technology world fast, and they do it for various reasons. One, they're not being heard at the table in some cases. Some think it's a work-life balance. I keep thinking, I had such a great work-life balance as a technology leader that I still don't quite get that one. And so I'm still looking into that. I joined a site recently, Women in Coding, because I was just trying to understand that a little bit more, because I think I just still feel that there is work-life balance if you can manage work-life balance. As far as not being heard, that's, it's up to me and it's up to you, or all of us as individuals, to figure out how to be heard, right? So.
Have you ever experienced unfair treatment because you're a woman, or because you were younger in your days, career, or from another organization? So did you ever experience those? And if so, how did you deal with that?
So when I was younger, I would probably tell you, yeah, every day I was feeling that way. But I have experienced it. And therefore, but it's actually up to me to resolve that, right? It was up to me to figure it out, and it was up to me to communicate. And if someone wasn't going to listen to me, then go find the person that would listen to me, right? So I don't want to provide an excuse for not taking the action on my own. It's up to us individually to take action when we're not being heard.
So what kind of actions have you taken?
Going to my boss, talking about the issue, going to their boss, documenting well if I felt, I never took anything personally. It's more about the issue itself, right? So another, piece of advice from a long time ago was, I was brought here to do a job, right? And here's the mission, or here's the statement associated with that job. It's not about me personally. This is what I was asked to do. So you need to listen to that. And so, I mostly presented it from that perspective.
Great, thank you. So as a field though, in the technological fields, what are some things organizations can do to make the technology fields more inclusive of women or underrepresented minorities or other underrepresented individuals?
I think that there's general awareness now, more so than there ever has been in the past for that, and making sure that, people are promoting correctly. They're still rewarding for the right kinds of skills, but I think there's generally been a good awareness. More work needs to be done. We need to keep it in front of us all the time. I need to do it. You need to do it. It has to be part of us all the time, to continue that awareness and promote across all people, frankly. Maybe I might spend a little more time, like I mentioned, I was looking at the women in coding and things like that. I probably would, spend a little bit more time making sure that people were aware of opportunities and promotion opportunities, for all, frankly.
What's the best advice? I know you have given some really good advice, but what other advice you received that has been helpful to you? What are some bad advice you have received? What's the one piece of advice you give out the most? But most importantly, how do you sort through good or bad advice from other people?
So I was fortunate to have my father, who gave me a lot. He has now since passed, but his best advice was always momentum, right? Always move things forward, always keep moving everything forward. And I had his coaching, frankly. He was a technologist, but he was also an attorney and in the business. So he was always about, advising me on momentum. Keep things moving forward, keep your career moving forward, keep the business moving forward, keep your projects moving forward. If you think about that all the time, that's really what everybody wants, right? So that's kind of something that keeps me going, sort of all the time. The worst advice I probably would have received it, acceptance. Don't accept it if you don't like it. Don't accept it. So those are the two sort of action words, if you will. But I'm not going to accept it if I don't believe in it or it's not right.
I like the idea of momentum, keeping the momentum going. So what if you're stuck in something? What if it's a very difficult project? And how do you get yourself out of the rut and regain your momentum? Do you have one or two examples of that?
The only example that just came to mind because you said it was, I was in a tough project one time and really tough. And I decided that instead of complaining about it, I would fully embrace it. And so we created what I would have called like a war room strategy. And I just showed up, and I got through it. But that would be the only one I could think of that, um, you just sort of I couldn't give up. But that would be a strategy I would sort of throw myself into it as opposed to running from it.
Oh, so was it because of some conflict? What was it like? What was
It's
the?
technology. It was a technology-based timelines and deadlines, and you
Mm,
needed to get everybody together. So if you want to get everybody together, then you have to show up too. You can't just say go
oh,
off and figure it out. You've got to be present too. So
mhm,
that's how I got through that.
I see. Well, my last question before we turn to our audience for questions. My last question is: what do you read, watch, or attend to keep yourself up to date with the ever-changing technology landscape?
Yeah. So of course I wanted to say, I like to read like fiction
Mhm.
stuff that will just keep me, going some other place. So for fun, and I don't like to read anything that scares me. But I'm not putting a pitch for them, but I like the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you guys read the Wall Street Journal, but it is of all the papers, it usually has a great synopsis of stuff and some interesting stuff. And the editions, I was even thinking, I specifically pay attention to the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. Tuesday, it's generally about operational kinds of things. At least that's the way it seems to me. And then Fridays in the weekend edition always has like a technology insert. I just read one recently, it talked about, people sort of let's move to the cloud, like you don't just move to the cloud, it doesn't work that way. And they were talking about that, and I thought that was a great article. I like The Wire for some interesting kinds of stuff. Like they always have something cool or extra going on. And then I do belong to a lot of associations that are around, what I do. Whether it's in the government space, there's a lot of technical associations and I'm in the business process outsourcing world, and I'm in the infrastructure world in consulting services. So I belong to a lot of associations with that.
So I'm interested in you talk about citizen services, which is wonderful. What's your vision for that? I don't know, when you were interviewing for the job, did they ask you for big visions or directions or things you can see that you would like to implement when you are in the role? I'm not sure how much you can share, but maybe big picture, what kind of things would you like to help make happen in federal agencies?
Um, so when you started to say, well, I'm going to ask a question, I don't know if you all did this, but I was like, oh, the professor's going to ask me a question. Oh my God. But anyway, so the citizen services that I'm sort of passionate about, I guess, is, we're delivering, whether you're calling 1-800-Medicare, right, for information, or you're talking to the IRS, or you're talking, think about it's mostly civilian for the most part, service civilian agencies, but think about what their mission is, and then think about what it is that I have to deliver back. I don't want any issue with calling 1-800-Medicare, right? I'm going to register and I want to know that you've got all my information, and I want that just like that at my fingertip. And whoever I'm talking to, which I'm even annoyed I have to talk, right? I want to be able to get it very quickly. And they've done a lot of technology improvements now with robotics and basically all of that. That new technology is streamlining citizen services, frankly, and it's good, and it works. And so I love that kind of stuff, how you can do it, because I know I don't want to talk to anybody to get something done. But then you have to think about, even think about the distribution of monies through the COVID situation with the Affordable Care Act and all that stuff that was going on. Those are systems that are doing that, right? And people want to know information quickly, or a transaction has to occur very quickly. Those are all part of the citizen services. So it's all that kind of thing that's going on, and the technology to enhance that or make that a better experience is what I like.
Mhm, mhm. So how is doing technology services in federal agencies different from commercial organizations? I assume there's more consistency and needed and maybe compliance related things as well. What's your observation? How is it different from deploying technology in a for-profit organization?
I don't think it's that much different, other than, a for-profit organization. When we talked about ROI a few minutes ago, that's pretty critical, because you get down to to stock, the value of the company, start talking about all that stuff, and it has a big financial impact. The federal and even in the state and local communities themselves are usually doing a law, perhaps, and the regulatory activity is very important there. And security and compliance and all of that critical. But it is in the commercial side too. So the mission of the two entities is a little bit different, but the outcomes are basically that, it's using technology to do something. So it's very similar.
Mhm, mhm. So what roles do you generally play in your current role and in your role at IBM when you are working with clients? Are you the guide? You guide them in terms of here are the technologies you should be considering, or are you more the support and service that they tell you what they want to do and you figure out how to support them in their needs? Or some other roles? What roles do you usually generally play in those projects?
Well, it's both, right? So it's both roles. So your requirement to introduce new technology to improve some kind of thing is what they're maybe paying you for, whether you're a consultant, you're delivering IT services, or you're supporting an application. Nobody wants anything to break, yet we have to do technical improvements, whether it's to the hardware and software, firmware, those kinds of things, or whether, again, it's a new feature that you're implementing. Nobody wants anything to break. So it's both, it's both those things in those environments
Mm.
that I do.
Mm. Who do you interface with usually? Do you work directly with their IT? Do you work with the business side or the
We
service
work,
side or
yeah.
store?
So in the business that we're all in, or even as somebody new, you're communicating with IT sides, you're communicating with end users in some cases, and definitely business units or divisions,
Mm.
all of them.
How about the COVID influence? So now we have COVID, and it seems, um, are they doing similar things? So COVID actually highlights the importance of technology and things. Um, what kind of technologies? Well, we did have a question here from one of the audience members talking about what are some popular solutions or technology solutions that are being required or requested by nonprofit or governmental organizations. And I assume there's a lot of different ones. But how does COVID highlight or change directions, or do they push more for certain technologies than others? What's your observation?
On the COVID situation, my general comment is, for the companies and the agencies, et cetera, what an excellent job they've done. We moved everybody to a remote. Now, think about that, right? Think about the technology that wasn't in play for that, whether it be just your internet, service and the speed with which you could do something, or the application itself and how you had to interface. We had to change contracts. We had to get security measures put in play. We had to. Can you imagine doing, if a team was used to whiteboarding together, how do you remote whiteboard? Well, there's lots of tools for remote whiteboarding, and you got to get used to using them. And the teams had to work on that. And you had to, everybody in the country had to do that, in the world, frankly. And we had to move people to a remote in one particular organization. 45,000 people had to come up live within like a day. And people's homes, how did you get your home set up, right? How did you get the equipment out there? How did you get the equipment repaired? What did you do when your laptop went down and the office was closed, right? Think about all that went on. It was just amazing, that I think people just did an outstanding job to try and do all that. And the technology allowed for a lot of this. The fact that we're on Zoom right now, and Zoom is so natural now, it wasn't that natural, even a year ago, right? We did it that much.
What do you think would be different after COVID? Hopefully there is an after COVID. How will be different? Are we going back? Where are we going?
Yeah, everybody's doing there's a lot of articles on that. So it depends on the companies, it depends on the requirements. There's probably going to be hybrid models. I think the governments themselves have accepted more remote work than ever before. And I think got very comfortable with that. So, a lot of people who had command and control mindsets, really got out of that, realized, hey, I can get a job done and you can be remote. There are other people that need to, be back in the office for different things. So you're going to see hybrid models going on here. I think it's Amazon that declared that, they want everybody back in the office. And that's a little bit easier when you have campus-like settings. But when everybody's gotten used to doing this, I think there'll be hybrid models here.
We got one person who's interested in Maximus, actually, who asked a question about it. Could you tell us more about Maximus?
Sure. Maximus is a company that does a lot of business process outsourcing and a lot of IT services. And so you see Maximus mostly in the public market, state and local and federal, and they are a citizen service. I would call them a citizen service company. The focus that we have is, digital transformation for our clients. So that talks about taking what's running and making it better. We talk about delivering services with, a lot of people who get trained on rules and regs and all that kind of stuff, and then consulting and IT services. So we're specifically in very, very known in the state and local and federal market.
Great. So during COVID, there's a lot of data collection, data analysis, and data publicizing the data in terms of, for example, infection rates and things. What do you wish would have been better in this whole process?
I wish we didn't have COVID.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought they did a pretty good job, just generally as much as possible getting the data out to me. I don't know about you all, but initially you started just watching it. You couldn't even stop watching it, right? As the numbers went up. And then, I think people got just better at reporting all that information. I still think there's just a lot of data out there, and the country has responded so well to this, from the life science companies who moved very quickly to the supply chain models that got put in place. So I don't know. I think they're doing a good job as they can, given what we're facing. I just wish it were over.
Yes, me too. Well, do we have any other questions from the audience? Well, if nothing else, thank you so much, Teresa, for your time and sharing your experience. It's really informative.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.